Hey, Tony, thanks so much for being with me.
Hey, John. No, this is going to be great. I'm really looking forward to it.
So this is Positive University, and we talk about ways to stay positive. I was curious, how do you stay positive?
I think to me, John, it came from my mother, and she always used to talk about life being a movie. And you don't know how the movie is going to end. You have to wait and see how it plays out. You can take a photograph at any point in time. It can look great or it can look terrible. But she always used to encourage us, hey, we're taking a snapshot, and it might not be the best right now, it might not be exactly what you want, but let the movie play out. Don't get too concerned that this photo is going to define your life.
And so when you're going through a particular challenge in that moment, is that the perspective that you have?
It really is, that it's just a single moment. It's not going to define you. If it's great, if it ends up being a Super Bowl win, enjoy it. But know that you still have more life to live. If it's a disappointment, don't let it knock you down. Don't let it stop your path, because you still got a long ways to go, and you don't know what's going to happen. I think that's the great thing about sports, what sports teaches you. Some of our best victories, we played the New England Patriots to get to Super Bowl 41. We were only ahead 1 minute in the whole game, but it was the last minute. And that, we look back on it and wow, what a great game. We don't even tell people we were behind for 59 minutes.
That's great. So you have a new book coming out with Nathan Whitaker. It's called The Soul of a Team. Talk about that book and why it's so important.
Yeah, Tyndale came to us and they wanted to do something on teamwork. And there's a lot of things out about how to put together a winning team, whether it's an athletic team, a business team, a school, a family. And so we thought, we could use some of the lessons we've learned from the athletics, some of the lessons from the Bible, kind of tailor them together and show people this is how you put together a winning team. And so I think it's going to be great, and it'll give some great examples.
Why call it the soul of a team?
We kind of were coming up with an acronym trying to let people know what it's all about. And soul being selfless, being one, being united, and then the L is having a life purpose bigger than the team itself. And so that kind of lets people understand if you want to put together a winning team, you've got to have something that connects everyone.
The Eagles, won the Super Bowl, and a lot of people don't know that they had a really strong bond of faith. A lot of those guys were believers, and they believed together. Some guys came to faith on that team. Can you talk about that, and how important is that? Is that what connected that team?
It is what connected that team, and it was tremendous. I had the privilege of being there for 2 weeks for NBC. We were leading up to our Super Bowl broadcast, so I was following the NFC. I watched them in their first playoff game and then in the championship game, and getting to be around those guys. And they had something, a bond that brought them together, that allowed them to play. The sum was greater than the combination of the parts. And on our broadcast, I predicted they were going to win. And everybody, Rodney Harrison, especially my partner, oh, you're right. There's no way they can beat the Patriots. They're not talented enough. But it was more than talent. You saw this energy, this coming together, and it really was built around their Christian bond.
Yeah, what makes a team want to fight for each other?
There can be any number of things, but it takes that one thing. And as a head coach or a leader, that's what you want to bring into it. We've got to incorporate something that captures the imagination, the energy of everybody. And sometimes it's the goal of doing something for the city and your fans. Sometimes it's an individual person. You can get a player injured, and everybody says, gosh, we've got to win for him. But usually there's something that ties everybody together that is even more than just your individual goals. And for them, I think it was their relationship with Christ and the fact that they wanted to be able to go out after the season was over and say, here's the reason we were so successful. We had this common bond, looking out for each other, playing for each other, but doing it for more than just ourselves, doing it for Christ.
Love that. Does your book, The Soul of a Team, does it share a how-to prescription? Is it a fable? Is it stories from your experiences? Describe the book a little bit.
It is. We kind of talked about it and said, it's hard to do it in a kind of lifelike fashion, because there's some stories that you just don't want to tell. It wouldn't put people in good light. But if we used it as kind of a fictitious story with some things that you might recognize, that way we could do it, tell the good and the bad, the positives, what to do, and things to avoid. So yeah, it is a very much prescription based. Hey, if you want to build a winning team, here's 5 things you need to do. Here's 5 things you need to avoid.
That's awesome. So I love to ask people the triple H, hero, hardship, highlight. So who's one of your heroes on your journey through life?
I think my biggest heroes were actually my parents growing up. We I was born in a little small industrial town in Michigan, Jackson, Michigan. My mom and dad were school teachers, and their view of life was, who can we help? And I think that's why they wanted to go into teaching. They would get thousands of young people that they could help on their journey. And my dad grew up in the Depression. He grew up in the segregation era, fought in World War II, came back to and got his degree, and went to Washington, D.C. because he wanted to teach in segregated schools. He wanted to give kids an opportunity that weren't getting the best opportunity. He wanted to help them. My mom taught English, but she taught Shakespeare and public speaking because she wanted to have access to everybody in the school. And she didn't want it to be a situation where you had to get a certain grade. If you wanted to learn about Shakespeare or you wanted to take a speech class, you could take it from her. And I still get letters from people today who tell me, hey, your mom helped me this way, your dad did this and gave me confidence that I could learn science. And they were just special. And their whole thing that they passed on to us, their job as teachers, they felt like was to help all their students get A's. And so when I got into coaching, that became my kind of mantra. I want to help all my players become all pros. And if you look at it that way, that you're helping someone as opposed to you're the boss or you're in charge, it gives you a completely different attitude. And because of that, they were my heroes.
I love that. My son is 18. He's going to college next year. Were you like that as an 18-year-old? Were you thinking that way as an 18-year-old?
You know, slowly. I was getting it from my mom and dad. It probably didn't come across to me until later on when I started coaching. But very much, I played quarterback in high school and college, and I kind of felt like that was my job, to set everybody else up, to make my teammates better, to help them play better. And I did get that from my parents.
And people don't know you were an incredible basketball player as well. That was recruited to play Division I.
I love basketball, John. That was my sport. That's what I wanted to do. And the football really came later. But I just enjoyed sports. My dad gave me that love. He took me to games. He gave me that opportunity to kind of explore different sports and be around him. And I loved him for that.
So what was a defining moment in your life? It's a hardship that you faced that helped you become who you are today.
Yeah. My biggest hardship, I went probably 20 years in life without many disappointments. I wanted to play sports. I got a scholarship to Minnesota. I got a chance to play 4 years at quarterback at a Big Ten school. We never won state championships or Big Ten championships, but I was always doing well and enjoying it. At the end of my senior year, I thought I was going to get drafted and play quarterback in the NFL, and I didn't get selected in the draft. Right where we are now. Last week's NFL draft brings back memories. I was sitting there waiting. The phone never rang, and I thought my career was over. And it was very, very disappointing. I remember walking around campus and saying, Lord, I just don't understand this. How could this happen to me? How could I not get picked? But the next day, the Pittsburgh Steelers called and they said, we don't want you to play quarterback, but we'd like you to come and play defensive back for us. It was disappointing because I had trained so long to be a quarterback, but I said, I want to play with the best. So I'm going to go there and see what happens. And it was really God looking out for me. I went there, spent 10 years with Chuck Noll, who I think was the most fantastic coach in NFL history. I got around some Christian athletes. We had a ton of strong Christian believers on that team, learned how to be a championship team, but learned more about being a man and growing up. And it was just the perfect situation for me. I didn't know it at the time, but God was training me to be a coach.
That's powerful. What did you learn about accepting your role on the defense rather than being a quarterback?
I had to learn that. All of a sudden, I wasn't the focal point. I wasn't the best player, but I learned, it's kind of what I talk about in the book, that the goal once I got to Pittsburgh was to help the team win. It wasn't about what I could do, the accolades I was going to get. I was just a small part of this big machine that was trying to win a Super Bowl. And it was fun. It was awesome to know that, hey, we had this goal every day when I came to practice. It wasn't just me getting better. I've got to do my role and do my part to help us win a Super Bowl. And it was fantastic. At
that point, did you ever think you'd be this Hall of Famer?
Never did. I was the 47th guy. As a matter of fact, I can remember the last cuts my rookie year, and I'm sitting in my hotel room waiting for the phone to ring for them to tell me to come over and turn in my uniform and my playbook, and it didn't ring, and I went back to work on Monday. I'm like, I'm still on the team. My uniform's still in the locker. And it was just sensational. But I always felt I was going to be kind of a utility man, bit part player. I did end up getting traded 2 years later. Getting cut, and just thinking, well, I had a fun career. I got a Super Bowl ring, but that was the end of it. And then Coach Noel called me back and said, I'd love to have you on our staff. I think you've got a way to connect with players. You've got knowledge of the game. I think you'd be a good coach. And then serving 15 years as an NFL assistant coach, climbing the ladder, feeling like I'm learning things. Boy, I could really put something together if I ever got a chance, but it didn't seem like that chance was going to come. Getting to Tampa, being here 6 years, and turning them into a playoff caliber team, but then getting fired. So you have these disappointments, and you're never sure how it's going to turn out. But again, it was just the Lord's plan to move me to Indianapolis and that Super Bowl win. And then one of the interesting things, the feature writer for the Tampa Tribune, Martin Fenley, he called me after I was selected to the Hall of Fame, and he said, I'd love to do a story on you. The last story I did was 15 years ago when you got fired. And so from being fired to the Hall of Fame just shows you how the Lord takes care of you.
It's amazing. Yeah, when you were fired, did you ever imagine that you would be winning a Super Bowl?
Didn't think that was going to be the case. I was wondering, what is God trying to show me in this? Am I supposed to stay here in Tampa but get in another line of work, another avenue? Maybe it's ministry, different thing, or do I continue on in this football career, and where is that going to be? Jim Irsay, the owner of the Colts, called me a couple of days later, and he said, I want you to be our coach. We've got to connect with the fans. We want to win, no question about it, but we've got to build a fan base. We've got to connect with the community. I think you're the perfect person to lead our team. And that just hit me so hard. That was exactly what I wanted to do. My wife and I said, this is the place. And we had a beautiful 7 years there, a lot of wins, a Super Bowl, some fantastic times, and something I could have never predicted.
Amazing journey. I know it's hard to play the what if game, but if you were playing today, would you have been a quarterback today?
I think so. When I played, the creative guys, the smaller guys, there really wasn't a market for that. And now I look and see what Russell Wilson, Baker Mayfield now is the first pick in the draft, 5'11", which was my size. And people were saying, oh, you're too small, you're too short to play. I think we've got a better idea how to utilize those players. So maybe I would have gotten a chance to play quarterback, but it may not have turned out this way.
Exactly. God has a plan.
Yeah.
So what's one of your highlights that you've had on your journey? I know there's been many, but what's one that stands out?
Gosh, a highlight, obviously, winning the Super Bowl, standing on that victory podium, looking out and seeing all of our fans celebrate, our players with their families and their kids, and saying, you know what, this wasn't just a win for us, not just the 53 guys in the locker room. This was a win for the city of Indianapolis, for our organization, for our fans. It was just a tremendous feeling. That was one of the highlights of my career. I think my other highlight was standing in front of my first team in Tampa and saying, men, I'm here, I'm your new coach. I'm here to help you win a Super Bowl. But more than that, we want to be good citizens. We want to transform the city of Tampa. And then looking back and seeing guys like Warwick Dunn, who have built homes for single moms and helped them get started. Derek Brooks has a foundation where he's now got a charter high school and helps so many kids move on in life and go to college. And to see that those guys really did hear what I was saying, and they took the challenge of it's more than just winning. we've got to contribute to the community. And I think that's a highlight also.
It's a big highlight. What does success mean to you? I know you're really big about significance more than success. So what does success mean to you?
I tell I used to tell my players all the time, success to me is doing everything you can do with the skills and the gifts God gives you. So if God gives you this much and you maximize it, then to me, you're being successful. You can do a ton of things, but maybe you didn't do everything that God would have allowed you to do. Is that really success? No, you just rode on someone else's coattails. You did a lot of things, but you weren't really as successful as you should have been.
It seems like in the past, a lot of guys weren't very vocal about their faith, but more and more players and coaches are more vocal. What do you think about that?
I think it's awesome. As I said, we had a strong group of Christian athletes on the Steelers, and not many people know that. When I tell those stories, people say, oh, Pittsburgh Steelers, a steel curtain. I didn't know that. And we had a ton of guys like that. I don't think the media really went after that side of the story too much. We probably weren't as vocal. But I think what happened, Reggie White really made it okay to speak about your faith and say, you know what, I'm a great player, and I can speak about Jesus Christ, and I can do it in a way that is not going to turn people off. It's going to just be telling who I am. And when that happened, I think that gave people more boldness. It gave the media more of a sense of, hey, we can accept this. We can look at the other side of Reggie White, not just the player, but the person. And I think since then, in the last 10 or 12 years, it really has given guys the okay to say, you know what, I am going to talk about my faith, and I am going to be bold.
Well, you were one of my heroes, and the Steelers were my team, actually. I rooted for you. I remember going to the Jets game. I lived in New York, made up a sign, the Steelers and Noel will win the Super Bowl. Still have a picture of that sign that I made going to that game.
That'd have been.
So last question, Tony. What are you excited about going forward in the future?
My wife and I are really just trying to figure out, where does the Lord have us? What can we do to help people and make an impact in this kind of later season of my life? I've had a chance to mentor young athletes for 30 years, and I did that, and that was fun. How can I now step out of that athletic realm and help young people, whether they're athletes or not, help them grow, help them look at, how can they chase their dreams, but keep the Lord first and know that, that has to be the biggest part of the team that you're on. So I'm looking forward to that. I've had a lot of chances to speak to people in the last couple of years, and I'm hoping to do even more of that.
I know you're going to be really busy managing your son Justin's broadcasting career. I know you'll be doing that. What was that like to see him do all these interviews during the Super Bowl? He did an incredible job, got a ton of media attention, but it was well-deserved because he was better than a lot of the pros.
It was so unbelievable because he's always been into sports. And since I started broadcasting, that's given him an opportunity to just say, what about this? What about that? If I could meet this guy or whatever. So he got to spend a lot of time around the Eagles. He got to go to the Super Bowl. He interviewed Justin Timberlake for the halftime show. He interviewed the commissioner, all these players. And he had a wonderful time. But I was able to take him in the locker room after the Eagles won. And we went to see Nick Foles and Carson Wentz, and they were actually in the training room just off to the side, and they were had a prayer service and just talking about how wonderful this was going to be able to share Christ with people who were looking at them as Super Bowl champions. And so for him to see that in the midst of everything, all the fun he had broadcasting, all the attention he got, but to see these Eagles players say, you know what, the most important thing was, we did this the right way. We did it for the Lord. It was pretty special.
Tony Dungy, thank you so much. You're a blessing to the world, and I really appreciate you spending time with me today.
Hey, John, thank you for having me on the podcast.